Call the roll. In the room with me is City Managers Eric Meadow, Greg Ferguson, and Randy McCaslin. I am present. Michael Holmes, are you with us remote? How about Cyril Jefferson?
Hey, Chairman Hudson, this is Councilman Jefferson. I'm here.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Peters, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Good morning.
Good morning to you. Michael Holmes, are you with us? I know he's starting two at a time. I'll come back to them in just a second. We have two items on our agenda today, and we will begin with a presentation from staff on our Southwest Greenway. I believe this is Mark McDonald has been asked to bring in some numbers for us.
Yes, sir. Just here to answer any questions you may have and to let you know that we have Transportation and Engineering Services have worked together to go back and look at the estimate that was prepared and presented some time ago regarding the section of Cassell Street between Vale and Ward Avenue. And we've gone back and looked at those numbers, and they really haven't changed very much. We're somewhere in the $80,000 range to do that, to construct the sidewalk and ramps and do all of the pavement markings and everything that would be necessary to convert a portion of that street into that Greenway connection between Vale and Ward. Happy to answer any questions that we can regarding that.
Any questions from our remote council members?
So Mark, and that would include the painting, any safety features such as armadillos or some of those poles, and the handicap ramps. Is that correct?
That is correct. It would be striping the street off to approximately a 16-foot width from the south curb line, or I guess that's the west curb line, between Vale at the roundabout and Ward, and then putting in it's about 200 feet of sidewalk and then handicap ramps at each of the intersections where it's cross, and all of the striping and everything that would be required to make that conversion.
Okay. I've walked that section several times, and it's very utilized by pedestrians, on bikes, even handicapped people, on wheelchairs and walkers. And I know students use it to walk over to Fairview. And anyway, I think I saw that Dorothy's on here. Dorothy, can you give us a little bit of background and the purpose of community that this will serve? Is Dorothy on this call? Oh,
We're checking.
It says
There she is.
the host has muted me. Am I unmuted now?
You're on now, Dorothy.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for allowing us to speak today. I think Tony's here as well, Tony Collins. If I just may read a just short statement of request. We are here today to ask the Prosperity and Livability Committee to vote to give a favorable recommendation to City Council to appropriate $80,000 to $82,000, whatever Mark thinks. I think it was 82 originally, in the city's upcoming budget for fiscal year 2021-2022 to construct a short segment of the Southwest Heritage Greenway, also known as the Greenway Extension by High Point University students. It's approximately 1,200 linear feet along Cassell Street from West Ward Avenue to Southside Park and Recreation Center in the inner city Southside neighborhood. No land acquisitions or major overhauls are needed for this project. The Greenway Extension will use excess city-owned right-of-way on Cassell Street, bordered by city-owned property. This section of the Greenway will improve quality of life and public safety for adults and children alike, walking to the neighborhood's public elementary school, public park, community garden, public recreation center, and new 1-acre botanical woodland teaching garden. This Greenway extension was first proposed as part of the Southside Revitalization Plan adopted by City Council in 2004, 17 years ago. The plan called for connecting Golston and Southside parks with a greenway along the floodplains of Richland Creek. If I may use a couple of well-known phrases, justice delayed is justice denied. and silence is acceptance. That's why we're here today, asking you without further delay to vote in favor of recommending to Council an $82,000 appropriation to construct this project, and to follow up by placing this recommendation on the next Council agenda for a vote by City Council to approve the appropriation in the upcoming city budget. The benefits of this Greenway extension are many: economic development, equity, fairness, improved quality of life, greater public safety, cleaner water, improved public health, and better connectivity to public investments. Planning and engineering are completed. The project is ready to implement. Won't you help us achieve better quality of life and greater public safety in this low-income core city neighborhood? Again, to borrow a phrase, we're all better off when we're all better off. Thank you. Tony might want to say a few words too, if you'd allow him.
Absolutely.
Good morning, Tony Collins. Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to address this committee on what is a really vital program that we have in the community. I just want to concur with Dorothy's statement. We're having a real impact in this part of High Point. And I have just a follow-up kind of community impact statement, which I'll read. The neighborhood appreciates the Greenway with its daily use by our community. As president of the Southside Neighborhood Association, I know the practical impact of having this asset for the taxpaying residents of High Point in our community. We understand policy, procedure, protocol, figures, and facts. However, the true cost is in the people's connection to the area as expressed with pride in the community. As an example, I was speaking with a resident of the housing that has gone up, the new housing in the Southside neighborhood, which is adjacent to this stretch of the Greenway. And that homeowner is truly excited about what's happening in the area. He bought in early. We went through some trying times, but now things are turning. And practical impact of that is that developers are coming into the area, home prices are rising. At this point, I really like to salute Mike McNair and his department for having the faith and the courage to be there for the long haul, because we are truly impacting what is our motto as the Southside Neighborhood Association, embracing our neighborhood for change. And that is what this Greenway represents in this part of High Point, which is the 27260 code. And we know the stressors, societal stressors that are in play there. I'd also like to thank Lee Tillery with the Parks and Rec, Chief Stroud and the High Point Police Department, Rebecca with Keep High Point Beautiful, as we do those programs, those opportunities to come in community where neighbor helping neighbor to help turn this area around. Also with the High Point City employees who come when we ask them through Operation Inasmuch to National Night Out, and they come and they work hand in hand with the community to help change this area. And also the Southwest Renewal Foundation with the beautification programs that are already in existence along the two legs of the Greenway that is there. The tree planting program, and of course the art that is along the Greenway. This has powerful, powerful impact on the community. People are already using those two legs. They do already use this stretch of Cassell, and because they're walking from the toddler park up to the rec center, the Southside Park, and the school. There are different ways of looking at this project. It's a continuing community development. We're instilling community pride. We're developing the green spine. It's a traffic calming measure, and it is an equity initiative. And we know what this means for our community. And finally, I just want to say that this Greenway represents, to our thinking, also a public safety measure as people are already using the street as a path again to the Southside Park, the Southside Rec Center, to the Fairview Elementary School, and to the toddler park. So we appreciate your consideration, and it's time for action now. So I endorse what Dorothy said. Let's move this, have a vote, get it to council, and let's get this done for this area of High Point. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much, Tony. Are there any remote council who have questions for either Dorothy or for Tony?
Chairman Hudson, this is Councilman Jefferson. I want to thank Dorothy and Tony for coming on and sharing with us the information and really making, I think, a very powerful statement on where they stand with this. I love the idea of doing this, and I am actually leaning towards supporting it in full. And honestly, I guess the question comes down to, on the city side, finding out where there's the opportunity financially to support this. What has our investment been in the past? Then also maybe, Dorothy, if you can expound a little bit on, because I know there's been a lot of private investment. I know you all received a sizable donation not too long ago, I believe, from the Hayward Foundation to support this kind of work. I know there's advocacy being done at the state level to support the work you all are doing down there. Maybe if we could just get a full scope here. I know you mentioned that 17 years ago in 2004, council heard it. And certainly I know that we received quite a bit of information from you, Dorothy, via the information that you sent to us by mail and email, and all that's been great. Could we elaborate a little bit on, maybe from the staff side, where the opportunities for funding are at, if staff has already identified where that might come from? Also, what's been our most recent investment specifically in this area for this purpose or related function? And then Dorothy and Tony, if you all want to expound a little bit more on the private investments, the other government investments from state, national, things of that nature.
I think he asked, didn't you, Cyril, ask for staff first to say what other investments have been made in the Southside neighborhood?
Yeah.
Yeah, Randy McCaslin is approaching the podium to handle that a little bit.
Well, I think Mike McNair is on, and I think the vast majority of the investment that's occurred recently down there has been through our community development department. I know that we have built some, are responsible for the construction of some houses and heavily subsidized the sale of those houses. I don't know the numbers, but I think Mike probably has a better idea regarding that than I do. As far as Greenway, do you remember what the Greenway investment was down there, Lee? Okay.
I do.
Okay. But we got, we did put, again, a lot of that came through Mike's department on the investment of the Greenway down there. We've made some significant investments in Southside Recreation Center over the years with a splash pad and other enhancements to that facility over the years down there. I don't have the numbers readily at this time, but those are the larger areas. As far as whether or not we have opportunities to fund this in next year's budget, it's too early to tell at this point. We've gotten no numbers from the county yet as far as as far as property tax collections. We expect those in the not too distant future. And our sales tax seems to be rebounding some. I think of the 4 or 5 months that we've had, or the experience that we've had for the current year, I think 2 months are up. 1 month is relative break even, and 1 month is considerably down. So we still don't have a good handle on where future sales tax dollars will be for the coming year and what impact it may have on the budget.
Randy, this is Mike. I can probably tick off a few numbers if you'd like to hear them.
Yeah, I think the group would, please.
Well, on the pedestrian bridge and walkway, I believe we probably was right around $325,000 or $350,000 to do that. The city also expended $2 million for floodplain mitigation to keep it from flooding down there at the creek. We, I believe we've had 17 homes built. So that had an impact of over $2 million on the tax base. Put in the roundabout, as you mentioned, the splash pad. So I would conservatively estimate that the investments in the area are well into the millions, 4 to 5 million, just in general. But there's been a lot of long-term continued effort since 2004. As Tony acknowledged, we've been there for the long term.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Dorothy, if you'd like to answer some of that as well, feel free.
Well, I thank you so much. We certainly want to recognize Mike McNair, who was the first to look at Southside and see its potential right next to the center of town, and did initiate the 2004 Southside Revitalization Plan, which included the Greenway along the floodplains from Golston to Southside Parks. And also in 2004, Mike initiated a bond that would help with the Richland Creek flooding. Richland Creek, they did actually a really good thing early on, a stream restoration, and High Point paid for it on its own. It didn't go to the North Carolina Clean Water Management Trust Fund, as most cities would do. They just initiated a bond and they got the work done. That was back in 2004 as well. And then there's been new housing being built, and it's accelerating now, and there's more planned. So, and then Mike was right. He has done so much work with the new bridge, trying to get that completed. And then he did add a part of the Greenway from Vale to West Taylor. That was opened in 2018. And then in 2019, Mike and Southwest Renewal Foundation, working with Randy Heeman, we pleaded and begged, as we do, for a Greenway extension to West Grimes, from West Taylor to West Grimes. And because that was old NCDOT right-of-way from urban renewal, that built big highways through Black communities back in the 70s, that has been underutilized. That big highway had never been used, never been utilized, never been built in the South Side, although Castle Street is an example of what they were trying to do. They initially wanted to cover up the creek, as that was the traditional way of planning back then. But anyway, it was Randy went to Mike, and Mike found the money, $99,000, about 93, I think, to extend that Greenway, the Heritage Greenway, from West Taylor to Grimes. And then we built a 1-acre botanical woodland teaching garden on either side. And then we've been adding public art along the way. We plan another piece again. And we are partnering with the city to do a 4 seasons bird sanctuary, that is native trees and plants with walking paths and signage along this Greenway extension, between the Greenway extension and the creek. So that would be another asset. It can continue the beautification south. This is phase 3 of the Heritage Greenway Loop. It's through the Southside neighborhood, the poorest neighborhood. And but at the same time, it is real infrastructure for people to move around, have greater mobility, which is always freedom. 35% of residents in the Southwest have no access to an automobile. So walking and biking are really a good way. And of course, this section, this phase 3 will connect to phase 1, and that will connect to the mass transit facility. So in the larger scheme of things, it all makes sense. Phase 1, where we've gotten the $500,000, is through the industrial corridor, and that was given by one of the surviving industrialists of High Point to help build that. And then we've just gotten a $398,000 provisional award from the North Carolina Land and Water Fund to buy up the riparian parcels along phases 2 and 3 to make the loop, a 3.94 mile loop from the beginning and ending at mass transit through the southwest area. And so we are hoping that that will come down the line, that we'll get that 398,000. All of the 13 parcels along phases 2 and 3 of the Greenway, the owners have said they're told, actually put in writing their interest in selling. So we've done a lot of work in that area from Highland Mill Village up through the Southside neighborhood to get the remaining parcels along the creek. And if we just get that provisional award, hopefully the money will come into North Carolina and we'll get that by June. And then we can start acquiring easements. We're already starting to acquire easements along phase 1 now. But that's kind of the overall scheme. It's to create greater mobility, greater environmental beauty and public and environmental health, as we say, track business to create jobs, help with public safety. There's a great disparity in the city with people of color on walking and biking. So many more accidents. I've got the figures if you like them. They're in lots of past studies that the city has done, from our health impact assessment in 2015 on up to the regional bicycle plan, showing that people of color have much, much higher percentages of bicycle and pedestrian crashes. And as you know, you can just get injured and an injury can last your whole life. You know, it's not just a one time off thing. So the Greenway, as I said, just has so many different advantages, and it's such a good, I mean, greenways are not like big highways, multi-million dollars a mile, you know, 50, $60 million a mile. Greenways, even with all the bells and whistles, are about $1 million a mile. And that's with all the bells and whistles. You can have them for less, like we've done here in the Southside neighborhood. $80,000 is a steal. It's just a great idea that actually came from Andy Piper. When we were down there one day, he said, let's just use castles, let's just use the excess right of way. Let's not build, we don't have to go down to the creek, but we can also, as I said, allow people to walk down to the creek through some nice winding paths among native trees to see the creek if they like. That's pretty much all I have to say right now. I just think it's time. The delay's been long enough. It's just incredible how things can get pushed back. And when there's a will, there's a way. That's why we want you to go on and act now and get council voted. You can find a place in the budget for it. You can if you want to. But you can also delay it another year, another 2 years, another 17 years. I mean, that's possible too. But is it really equitable and fair? We're all better off when we're all better off. And that's going to be our new motto. So we just hope you'll vote and put it on council agenda to vote as well. We don't want it to be delayed and put off and put off and put off, if at all.
Absolutely, Dorothy. I appreciate you sharing that, and staff, I appreciate you all sharing that information as well. Chairman Hudson, I think I've got another question or two. Is that all right?
Absolutely. Floor is yours.
So I'm thinking about this, and again, the points are very compelling. With regards to the retreat we had in early 2020, February, where we talked about neighborhood development and having that sort of targeted approach. And while the pandemic and everything sort of surrounding that kind of disrupted our plan to look at that more effectively and strategically, I think at least the spirit of neighborhood, the spirit of what we were looking to do there with neighborhood development was having that targeted approach to ensure that how we do neighborhood development can be comprehensive for a specific area. So that way when we're pouring investment into somewhere, we're leveraging it, number one, with other investments that are taking place. We're also leveraging it with, whatever investments internally we've made in the past or plan to make as a part of another thing, such as economic development, things of that nature. So my next questions, I was sort of laying the groundwork for it to say, my next questions lead to a couple other thoughts. And that's, I think it was referenced earlier in someone's statement, what's going on with that southwest corridor there. I think this West Green and what's going on with small scale manufacturing and all of that. I know that our planning department, and I believe the effort was being led by Heidi Galanti to really look at that more effectively, but also know Sandy Dunbeck and the crew with our EDC have been really effective or really trying hard, I think, trying to figure out how we can bolster more economic development in that area. Staff, do you all mind speaking on some of those things so we can get a better picture? Because again, to the point, what we brought up in February of 2020 during that retreat was, we want to do neighborhood development. And when we sort of target communities and make it an intentional, holistic approach, we want to leverage it against some of these other things that I just mentioned. So maybe if you all could share some information on that, I think that would help sort of build the case maybe.
Again, Randy McCaslin coming to the podium.
Well, Cyril, as you rightfully pointed out, the retreat was pre-COVID, and so the idea of enhanced neighborhood development for a specific area had to be put on hold due to the COVID situation that we find ourselves in. I know that on the small scale initiative, we bought 3 parcels of land there that are in the process of being transferred back to the city from the CDC. And those were essentially city funds that purchased those 3 tracts of land. Beyond that, Greg, can you think of anything else you would add to that?
There's some ongoing data work that's been done identifying neighborhoods that could be targeted. And I think Mike may want to elaborate on that a little bit, but that was more of a mapping exercise to take a look at what the data was that the city possessed to look at kind of an area of town. And at this point, there has not been a recommendation put forth as to where that targeted neighborhood would be for city council to consider that investment. But that work is, as Randy said, it's ongoing, but it's been significantly impacted by lack of funds and of course, COVID.
Thank you for that. If I could ask another quick sort of question, Mike, I think you have the number on this, the percentage of homeowners over in the Southside neighborhood area. Do you recall what that figure is? And if it's something we got to do a lot of digging, don't worry about it. I was just wondering if we had that information on hand.
I think it was in the mid-teens, 15 to 17%, somewhere in there. Hopefully it's gone up over the last few years, but.
Well, we did a statistical baseline in 2012, and in 2012, it was 30% home ownership. So I think the neighborhood is changing, but it's, and of course, those new houses are just wonderful. But I think home ownership is actually, it's been going down, it seems like, and perhaps it's going up again now. I hope so. That was something that when I saw those statistics in 1212, I just cried because I was hoping it was at least 50-50, but it was not.
Okay, well, even if there's not a high percentage of homeowners, do you all know, and I don't know if this is a statistic that's been ran or measured, but at least, and I'll give you all a little bit of my thinking here, is that folks and opponents, right? Opponents of your recommendation may sort of objectively say, are we considering making investment in areas where there's a very transient population? And to that, people go and look and say, well, what's homeowner percentage? But homeowner percentage isn't the only telltale for whether a community is transient or not. You can have sort of the long-standing residents, such as my grandmother-in-law. She lives over on Southside, and she's been there for about 40 years. She's never owned the property, but she's rented it, but she's been there 40 years. I certainly would not call her transient. Do you all know maybe the percentage of folks who are sort of long-term, or and again, I get this is sort of an obtuse scope and trying to figure it out while also being a little nuanced with the specifics of it. But I guess going back to my baseline question or thought is that, you know, investments in neighborhoods that are transient, either it leads to, as you all know and I know, gentrification, in which the community completely transforms, or actually, I don't know if there is another one that leads to it. I know we're all trying to figure out those good cases in which you can invest heavily in transient neighborhoods and the neighborhood sort of demographics don't change too much. Dorothy, Mike, does anyone have any understanding of what percentage, or if there's a significant amount of folks on Southside who are long-term Southsiders? Tony, maybe you know that.
Tony, yeah, Tony knows, and I know a little bit about that, but Tony knows.
Thank you, Councilman Jefferson. You've broached an idea, a topic that resonates in the community. There are long-term Southsiders who are in the rent situations, but that speaks to the industry of in real estate, where, you know, property and investments like that. We have, and so that can go in a lot of different ways, because that speaks to the condition of these rental properties. Now, I can speak for instance, you spoke of your family who's long-term Southsider. There are people generationally who have lived in this part of town. I can speak to Ms. Reese, who's in her 80s now. She's rented a home over there her entire life, not able to, and she's a known quantity in community because she's an activist. We call her our local historian. But yeah, so she's rented over 50, 60 years. So what does that say about our side of town? Let me just go back to this stretch of the Greenway is the low-hanging fruit. The problem section of the Greenway is from Ward Street along Castle to Elm Street. It looks like a third world country down there. Some of the interesting observations that we get from community, if city can't find the money, then we'll simply do like most people do in today's world. We'll get a camera, we'll go and take some video, and then we'll go to a YouTube video and we'll show the condition of this part of High Point versus what we're trying to do here. So let's help our citizens understand that with all the intentionality from the different departments, from private investment, that, as Dorothy said, if there's a will, there's a way, and now is the time. Thank you.
Chairman Hudson, do you mind if I just say something real quick?
Please go ahead.
Okay. Well, Tony, I'm glad you brought up that part from Ward to Elm, because that's what I was going to say, is that I understand that with COVID, and even if it wasn't COVID, we all have to be conservative and really be mindful of taxpayer dollars. But especially in this year, we have to be very, very conservative. So that's why we're not asking, or the Southwest is not asking for the Ward to Elm, just the part, like Tony mentioned, the low hanging fruit. Also that corner, I know that Sandy's been doing some really incredible work in that area with the small scale manufacturing and opportunity zone. And she actually even got Go Far. Ruth Ann May came down there and they did a Southside route, a Go Far route, which was so incredible for the community. But also there is a building and lot that I think it's for sale. It's at the corner of Ward and Cassell. I just know that if we go ahead and approve this from Ward to Vale on Cassell, that Sandy will even have more ammunition to have more development. So that's why, even in a conservative year, that I approve and would like to make the motion to approve this request.
I second it. This is Councilman Jefferson.
Okay. There's a motion on the floor and a second. Before I get to the discussion, Councilman Holmes, have you joined us?
I have, Chairman Hudson. I'm here.
Good, thank you. Are there any more members of council remote with us today? Very well. There is a motion on the floor and a second. Is there further discussion on the motion?
Can I make one more statement, just one more about Cyril, just follow up with Cyril a bit or not? I don't have to. About home ownership,
Sure.
may I?
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead.
Home ownership has been highly restricted in the past, as you well know, Cyril, by redlining. And this area was traditionally an African-American neighborhood, dates back to the early 20th century, maybe even the late 19th. It was the home of Daniel Brooks, the famous Reverend, who was such a city leader. But banks simply did not lend to African-American neighborhoods. That has been documented over and over and over again now. It's just coming into the public consciousness in a sense. But it's still going on today. My commercial banker very clearly said to me, you know, we really don't like to lend in this area. He was talking about where I live. And of course he lent it to me because I'm white and I have a long tradition with High Point Bank and Trust. But he was right out. He said, we don't really like to, lend money in this area. So it's a long tradition. And if there's a lot of people who chose to rent rather than buy, it's partially because it was so difficult to get a reasonable interest rate if you're African American and if you live in an African American neighborhood. Secondly, we are really been very interested in not having total, we want a mixture of making life interesting, a mixture of economics, incomes in the South Side and Southwest. We really have been working towards trying to get a little $5,000 to do a little pocket neighborhood after the city allowed that in the ordinance, to give smaller homes, lower, and maybe even be able to rent them if you don't want to buy it as you're a senior. But we really want to do that to create a mixture of incomes in that area. And as Monica said, and I think she's just dead on, that the Greenway will actually attract development. It'll attract builders, it'll attract business. If you put this green spine in place, it will help to create that. We need to be very conscious, though, as Cyril said, about gentrification. We really want a mixture of incomes in the inner city neighborhood, a mixture of cultures in the inner city neighborhood, so we can create and celebrate diversity and community identity and be good for all people, not just the rich, we don't want money just to flow uphill. So those were the 3 points I wanted to make. Don't blame the victim just that they don't own homes. It hasn't been a level playing field.
Dorothy, I appreciate that. Chairman Hudson, you mind if I have a few more comments?
Go ahead.
I think I made it pretty clear earlier that I'm in favor of this, absolutely. As I seconded Councilwoman Peters' statement, I appreciate staff, Tony and Dorothy, for entertaining my questions. If anything, I think the responses have helped to paint the picture of something that, yes, this is the low-hanging fruit. To be honest, we could have gotten to approving this $80,000 without going through those questions. But I hope you all will trust, Dorothy and Tony, that what you've made known for the public record is that there is a history, not just in our city, but in our country, that causes the kinds of situations where there's low home ownership, there's less investment in neighborhoods. And it's not one of those things because of a lack of want or lack of desire. It has truly been, as many folks don't like to hear the word, the effect of systemic and structural racism, systemic and structural disparities, systemic and structural inequities. And this is the low-hanging fruit, but my urging and what I would implore us to keep in mind as a council body and also as the public, as city staff, as leaders who who are working in Southside and in other communities, that we've got to continue having these conversations and continue to look at what are the holistic and comprehensive strategies to address the issues. We want to ensure that this Southside neighborhood can be developed and established and be able to be brought to, I think, the best version of itself, while also retaining its sort of cultural implications, and seeing the fruit of it in economic prosperity and social and political, social and personal and professional wealth and health. And I think to do that, we have to not only be able to approve these kind of $80,000 low-hanging fruits, but I think we have to be willing to champion for sort of the bigger changes, the ones that sometimes require us to be a little more less conservative, if I can use that term, only because I think it takes boldness. I think it takes true understanding of what's what. I am one of those people who believes government absolutely has the responsibility of taking these kinds of bold actions to ensure the best outcome for its residents, because government in the past has had its part in sort of getting us to where we are now. Now, that's not to assume that any person who's living and working on what we're doing today is to blame. Just like if we move into a big house that has issues, we're not to blame for that roof, that's the way it is, or the asbestos or whatever it is. But once it becomes our house, we are responsible for doing something about it. And so I'm glad that we get to vote today to approve this $80,000 low hanging fruit. But again, I urge and really hope that it does not stop there, and that it leads to much more investment in neighborhoods where it is needed. Thank y'all.
Any other discussion on the motion?
Chairman Hudson, this is Councilman Holmes. Can we clarify on what the motion is today moving forward? And I would just like to thank Dorothy and Tony for their presentation. I think it was succinct, and I think it captured exactly the spirit of what we hope to accomplish in High Point. Continuing to move forward while others are left behind is not progress. If some cross the finish line, but some don't, I don't consider that a victory. So if we're going to look at these types of projects and we think about not just equality, but equity, these are the types of things that I think we have to seriously consider. I mean, I understand, the fiscal nature of where we are, where we're emerging from, but a strategic long-term vision for the city of High Point has to include, what the Bible would call the least of these. And so these neighborhoods who have had little to no attention or investment, it's time. And so I thank you both for your, impassioned presentation. And I think it's exactly what the city needs to hear as we continue to chart the path for the future. So I just wanted to add that comment, Chairman Hudson, before we clarify the motion for today.
Thank you, Councilman Holmes. Anyone else have any comments? If not, I will close out by saying thank you, Dorothy, and thank you, Tony, for what you all do. Your work is invaluable, not only to the Southwest, but also to the city. I'll also say that no one in the city loves the Greenway more than I do. I run on it 3 times every week. I think it's one of the greatest assets the city has. That being said, last year's budget had a $7 million shortfall in it, and the only way that we made up that shortfall was to not increase wages, salaries. We had a hiring freeze, and we had to eliminate 11 jobs. And quite honestly, my priority is reinstating those 11 jobs. So simply out of economics, I can't vote for spending more money until we're able to make more revenue. And if this council spends money without increasing revenue, the only way that we can increase revenue is by property tax increase, and that is not something that I will ever vote for. So before we take a vote, I will say I cannot vote for increasing spending in next year's budget. Is there any other comments? If
Well,
not,
there might be a department somewhere like the DOT that has some extra money, discretionary. I know the city has some discretionary funding quite a bit. I don't think it's a choice between this Greenway extension and the health of the city of High Point. But I understand what you're saying, Wesley. I do think it probably needs to find a home in the budget somewhere, that there has been some remainder, perhaps, that has not been used in other projects, that is just being held. That often is the case. So I know that has to be decided, but we are just asking you to vote and to carry it to council to vote. And then those details can be worked out. Thank you. That's all.
very good. Thank you, Dorothy.
Chairman Hudson, I'll have another comment just because I think it's important for the record for everyone to note. Even in the midst of us having a revenue shortfall, what's clear for our city, and I'm certain municipalities all over the country, is that no one stopped doling out economic development incentives. And we can all understand why, because you want to bring the businesses that bring jobs and also increase your tax base.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that essentially not as saying, well, we're increasing spending with no revenue coming in. No, we increase the spending with the expectation that the investment will lead to revenue down the road. And so, to be clear, Chairman Hudson, I appreciate your point, but what was said by Dorothy and Tony and so many others today is that this kind of project, this isn't just some, let's throw some money out there and burn it up. This is investing. This is investing in what will improve our core, which we know has always been very important to the city. It's an investment in our core that allows us to get more tax base to the city and provide more revenue. It's one of those type things where you have to sort of spend money in some cases to make money. We can understand that because we all go 9-0 on every single economic development incentive. At least that's been that way since I've been on council. I know that's been a very short life, but we all understand you got to spend money to make money. And this is a very important investment. So I just want to make sure the record is very clear about that. So that way no one's thinking this is frivolous spending. I know that can be a hot topic amongst the barbershops and sort of lobby conversations.
Thank you, Madam Attorney.
I agree.
I recognize Madam Attorney.
Thank you, Chairman Hudson. I was just going to reiterate the request to clarify what the motion is. I heard some discussion on certain segments of the Greenway, et cetera. So if you could just narrow that down specifically.
Okay. Councilmember Peters, can you reiterate your motion? Make sure we have it correct in the record.
Yes. My motion is to approve the request for the Greenway extension from Vail to Ward on Cassell that was proposed and gone through engineering, that Mark McDonald has the design and everything. That's the motion, to go ahead and have that done. It's part of the small manufacturing area, the opportunity zone, and I definitely see it as an investment to our city.
Thank you. The only thing I will clarify is that we will be making a recommendation to council. We cannot approve. We only make a recommendation to the full council.
Right. I would like to do the recommendation as a favorable recommendation.
Very good. Everyone clear with the motion?
Yes, thank you for clearing that up, Councilwoman Peters. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? If not, there's a motion on the floor in a second. I will call the roll. Councilmember Peters, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilmember Jefferson?
Aye.
Councilmember Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
And I vote no. So that is motion is carried by a vote of 3-1. Our next item is an update. And sorry, before we leave, thank you, Tony, and thank you, Dorothy, for joining us today. Really appreciate you all being here.
Thank you, and I hope you'll follow up to present this to council.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our
Thank you
next
all. Let's get this done.
update from the High Point Museum. He's with us. Edith,
I'm here. Sorry, I had to get myself unmuted there.
thank you.
And then, okay, I think, are they putting up my PowerPoint here? I think, yes, there we go. Okay, great. Well, first of all, thank you for letting me come and share with you what the museum has been doing and how we've been responding to the pandemic. Things have been, of course, unusual, but we have been focusing on our mission, which is sharing greater High Point history, providing perspective for current issues, and strengthening the sense of community. And we've been able to really do that through all this time, even though we've had to change how we've done it. So I'm going to highlight some of that for you today. Can we move to the next slide, please? Thank you. One of the things, of course, like everybody, we've had to embrace technology as a way to reach our audience since we have been closed. And at the beginning, we didn't think it was going to be as long a thing as it has turned out to be. So we were initially focused just on directing people to our existing online content. And we've been focusing a lot on digitizing our materials and getting them available online over the last several years. You may know that our website has an online catalog where we keep adding more and more of our items there, where people can search through our items and pull up those records. And we also have a number of online exhibits, virtual exhibits that people could look at. And we have a partnership with Digital NC at UNC Chapel Hill that has been helping us to digitize materials over the last several years. So a lot of city directories and yearbooks from high schools in the area, newspapers. Al Campbell's Tribunal Aid is up there. And so we already had those materials online and people have continued looking at those. We average about 450 views of our materials through them a month and about another 200 views through the presence that we have on Internet Archive, which uses some of the materials from Digital NC. So we already had people using and continue to have people using our stuff online. But once we realized that people weren't going to be able to come back for a while, we were trying to figure out ways to help people have some of the same or similar experiences that they would have had coming to the museum. And Sarah Blanchett, our curator of education, has really had a big challenge because normally she plans programs for people who are going to be in person, and we haven't been able to do that. So she's had to develop all kinds of different video and different kinds of formats of programs to allow people to participate with the museum in a different way. And I won't go into all of those because there are so many, but they are on our website through our online learning tab, where you can go and look at many of those and see some of the different things that we've been doing. And all of them have been used, and we watch, how they're being used and kind of figure out which ones people are responding to more, so we can figure out the best way to meet the demands and needs of our community. So there are a couple I'll highlight. One of them is our History Hindsights blog that we got started. Again, we had a blog years ago that kind of fell by the wayside, but this seemed like a good time to bring that back. And that has developed its own little following. We've been able to work with the librarians in the Heritage Research Center over the library to help us write some of those. And it's also been a way that we've been able to bring back in some of our community historians, volunteers in our community who do their own research on a lot of different topics. And some of them have been writing some of those entries for us as well. And then one of the really fun ones that we got, Corinne, our registrar, found this from the Page service for us. And this does two things for us. Basically, it's a place online where we can load up letters and other documents that need to be transcribed from our collection. And then people can come in and actually do the transcription online. And then she's able to go back through and check back over them and make sure they're accurate and correct. But this is really speeding up our transcription, which is great because these documents are so much easier for people to research once they've been transcribed. And so, and it was a great way for us also to find something that our volunteers could do from home and still engage with us while we've been shut down. So We've actually had about 439 pages transcribed so far, which is about 75% of what we've put up so far. And this is really just moved this whole project light years ahead of where we would have been otherwise. So that's been exciting. And the next slide, please. Once we had kind of got the more recorded programming or programming that people could go access sort of on demand on their own time, we started moving into things that were more interactive or more real-time programming. And the most successful of those has probably been our History of the Underground Railroad program webinar that we actually just did last week. That one was successful beyond our wildest dreams. We worked with the Historical Society to put that one together. They were a big help with that. And we had 450 people registered for it. There were 280 people who were actually on the live presentation of it. And then we've had 382 views of the recording just since last week that we did this. So I think this program really demonstrates our potential to be able to reach, a lot bigger audience through some of these technology, platforms. We had a lot of teachers, a lot of Quakers from all over the country. And so this helps us spread our, bring more awareness to the museum and to High Point generally to people around. And hopefully these people will get excited about it and want to come visit High Point and visit the High Point Museum and really, bring more people here. So another thing that these virtual programs have done is allowed us to maintain partnerships with some of our community organizations. And one of those partnerships is with the Latino Family Center at the YWCA. And we've been working with them over the last few years, and that partnership has been deepening and growing, and we just did not want to lose momentum on that this year. But we also knew there was no way we were going to be able to do a Day of the Dead program like we did last year, where we had a couple hundred people in attendance. So we had to figure out a new way to do that. And it worked pretty well. And we were just really pleased that we were able to maintain those ties and that connection, so that when we are able to get back to doing things in person, we can just pick up where we are. We don't have to go back and try to regroup. And our next virtual program coming up is our Family Game Night, which will be here in February. And this will be the first time we've done breakout rooms in a live program, but we'll have the people who register will get rotated between 4 different game rooms that we have. This program that we've been doing in person has been growing and growing each year in popularity. And I think one of the reasons for that is that it's just such a great chance to connect with other people in the community. And that, that's one of the pieces of our mission that we try to focus on. And it brings in all kinds of different people, and families are just able to interact and make new friends with other families they've never met before while enjoying games and looking at the museum. So this year, I know everybody is still at home, so it won't be quite the same not being able to come to the museum, but we've tried to create a format where families will still be able to engage with each other, even doing it virtually. So we're looking forward to that one and continuing to find new ways to do these kinds of programs. Next slide. And this is a project that I'm very excited about. It's creating a new app for the museum, which we are in the process of doing now. And this will allow people to download historic walking and driving tours of High Point on their phones so that they can go out in the community and just really explore the history that's all around them that they see every day, but maybe don't realize the significance of. And this is a great format for our current situation because people can get outside, they can be in their own family groups. They don't necessarily have to wear a mask if they're in their own family groups that they live with every day. But it also gets people out of the house and exploring the community around them. So we're looking forward to launching this here as the weather gets just a little bit better. We're, as I said, in the process of developing the first of those tours now, and then it's something that we can continue adding and building on, really for years to come. Next slide. And then, of course, as the local history museum, one of our responsibilities, of course, is to collect and preserve the history. And we realized very early that this is a very historic moment that we're all living through. So we needed to be thinking about how we were going to collect the pandemic. And we set up our High Point COVID-19 Experience Project to give us the infrastructure to be able to do that. We created a page on our website and also a Facebook group that people can join and go to. And through either of these places, they can submit their own stories or photos or ideas of things that we should be collecting, people they think we should be interviewing, because we are doing some oral interviews of people who've had different experiences through this whole process. And this is something that we wanted to make open and accessible for High Pointers, because we know that people are experiencing this pandemic in so many different ways, and it even changes, over the course of the pandemic. And we really wanted the community to be able to give us that input as to what we should be collecting. So this is something that will continue to go on for a little while, because of course there's a lot of things that will be important to collect later that are currently in use. A lot of the PPE and masks and things like that people need right now. So we don't want to collect them right now, but as we get a little past this, we'll know what we need to go back and ask for. All right, next slide. And while all the new programming has been great and it has really helped us stay connected to our audience, we're seeing increases in the number of people engaging with all of our online materials. People are using it. We still miss our visitors, and we know our visitors miss us. So from the beginning, we've been thinking about how are we going to reopen and when are we going to reopen? And of course, our primary concern has always been about how to do this safely for our staff and our guests. We early on last spring, everybody on staff completed the Count on Me training that North Carolina, the state, has put together to help us with that. We've also been keeping up with all the different changing guidelines, and our professional contacts have helped us helped us learn from museums in other areas of the country that maybe were opening before us. And that has really helped us think about things that we might not have thought about otherwise. And then things that maybe we thought were going to be issues, see that, well, maybe they aren't as much issues we thought they were going to be. And we also did an intent to visit survey this summer to hear from our audience, to find out, how they were feeling about coming back to the museum, when they thought they would want to come back, what would make them more likely to come back, what kind of safety features that they felt were important to have. And so you can see some of the things here. And one of the key themes that kept coming out is that at that point, there really was a desire for these just to get outside and have these physically distanced, but like in real life experiences. Everybody was getting a little bit of that, virtual world fatigue by that point. So that really helped us focus on looking at reopening our historical park, because we felt that was the best place that we could meet that need, because that was an outdoor space and we could do a lot with that and still meet all the guidelines. So next slide. So in September, we were able to move forward with that. And I have to stop here and give a great big thank you to the High Point Historical Society, because they were huge in allowing us to be able to do this. They granted funds for us to be able to bring our historical interpreters back for this year, as those were positions that had been cut, in the funding earlier in the year. So that was really important, because we really could not create the kind of experience that people wanted in the historical park without them. So we are very thankful and appreciative of their assistance this year in that way. And of course, we had all the social distancing and the hand sanitizer available and all those things that you need to make that experience safe, because we couldn't really have people coming into those small buildings and keep the social distancing that's required. We created these QR codes that we put up on signs near the buildings, where people could scan those with their phones and pull up video content that would show the interior of the buildings and also some other information and stuff related to the buildings and their history. So that was a way that we kind of worked around not being able to go into the buildings. And then we also added outdoor exhibits. Since we couldn't let people come into the museum just yet, we tried to bring the museum outside as much as we could and created these sidewalk using the sidewalk sandwich board signs. And we actually have 2 exhibits at a time. There's one that runs down one side of them, and then if you go around to the other side and walk back up, you can see the second one. And those have been, really popular. People have been enjoying those. And then you can't quite see it in this image, but we do have a little free library that is near the Little Red Schoolhouse. Initially, we had closed that because of all the concerns about the virus living on materials and things. We have opened that now based on more recent guidelines, and that is seeing a lot of use. People are coming and taking and exchanging books out of there. So that's a nice service that we're able to provide there as well. All right, next slide, please. And then that was great for just allowing drop-in visitors. But one of the other things that we really wanted to get back to were creating some of the events and the programs, the community traditions that we have of people coming to the museum at different points in the year. And of course, these looked much different this year than they looked in the past because we had to reduce the numbers of people. But we did manage to have pumpkin decorating in the park in October. We were able to do a version of our holiday open house and even have some modified visits with Santa. And we also had another program in December that with some reenactor volunteers that helped us, that looked at the Scottish traditions associated with the new year that would have been familiar to settlers in this area back in the 18th century. And even though those experiences have looked very different, the people who have come have just been very, very, very grateful and have told us so much that how appreciative they are of having these opportunities to get out in the community and be around. So we've been glad that we've been able to find some way to meet that need. Next slide. And I've told you a lot about how things have changed, but there are some things that have stayed the same that really have not changed. There are, our artifacts continue to need care every day, and they don't care whether there's a pandemic going on or not. That really doesn't make any difference to them, but they still need to be monitored. They still need to be cared for. So that work has continued. We still have ongoing research that we continue to do both for our own exhibits and for requests that we get from both individuals and organizations in the community. That has continued. Research requests from individuals have actually been increasing a little bit. We've gone from about 20 a month to more like 25 a month. And those can range from, a quick 1 or 2 minute response to, a 3-day, deep dive looking for, the answer, helping people get the information they need. So, but we've continued with that. We also have worked with organizations like the Rockers, Congdon Yards, with projects that they've been doing this year. And here in the photo, you can see our curator, Marion Anabonet, who was advising the YWCA when they opened their time capsule this past year during their 100th anniversary and helping them figure out the best way to preserve those items. So those are just some examples of some of the things that we do. And then, of course, we also assist other city departments. You can see here one of the projects that our curator Marion did this year was helping to clean some of these historic markers that are around town. We had some at the museum. There were some in City Lake Park, some at the Oakwood Cemetery. And then also she worked with the staff at City Lake Park to replace the sign, the informational sign in front of the Mendenhall Meeting House that's there because the old one had faded so much. So those are things that we continue doing no matter what. And of course, this year we also were finishing up a NEH grant, National Endowment for Humanities grant project that has been assessing our environmental conditions in our museum building so that we can plan for the future improvements that we're going to need to really continue to maintain the proper humidity and temperature controls for our artifacts. So as we move forward into this year and into the next year, we will continue, of course, with a lot of these activities that stay the same, that artifact care and research and digitizing materials to go online. We will continue with our phased reopening plans, which will eventually include bringing back our volunteers when it's appropriate and getting people back into the museum. And we're really excited about that because we had to push our Coltrane exhibit from the Grammy Museum forward a whole year. We were originally supposed to host one that the Grammy Museum has put together on John Coltrane last September, and we were going to open it in conjunction with the Jazz Festival here in town. But of course, that did not happen. So we basically just shifted it forward for a whole year. So we're looking forward to being able to do that this fall. And one thing that while we will be able to eventually, have these in-person experiences again in a way that's more familiar to what we knew before, we also know that we probably will never really give up a lot of these virtual programming because we've realized it's allowing us to reach more people. And even at the beginning too, when we're able to start having people in the building, we're still going to be limited in the numbers of people. So we won't necessarily be able to hold everybody who would want to come to a program. And even in the best of times, our building could not have held all 280 people who participated in that webinar live on the Underground Railroad. So we are working on how we can upgrade our technology in our programming spaces in the museum. And we've recently gotten some quotes for that so that we can stream programs even as we go forward in the future. So that's the quick highlights of where things are. And just the last thing I want to say is just how proud I am of our museum staff. One other thing I forgot to mention too, and I do need to say this, is our social media is how we have been able to shift, not just using that as a platform for promoting the museum and our activities, but we have really started delivering a lot more of our content there. And Teresa Laughlin has been huge in helping us make that happen. And we have been seeing increases on all those platforms, the most dramatic on Facebook. We've had a 19% increase in our reach on Facebook since July. So that's another area that we've been working on. But basically, I'm just really proud of our staff who have worked so hard to rise to all the challenges that we faced this year. We have, I'm really fortunate that we have a group of people here who are so dedicated both to their profession and our community, and really working hard to make sure that High Pointers get the quality of museum that they deserve and can be proud of even during a pandemic. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much for that presentation. Does anyone have any questions, comments?
Edith, I just
Chairman
want to say
Hudson.
that you do a fabulous job. This is Councilwoman Peters. I just want to thank you for all your hard work, and you do a really great job. That's all.
Chairman Hudson, this is Councilman Jefferson. I want to chime in and say, Edith, or Director Brady, I'm sorry. Thank you for coming in and sharing these updates. I want to thank you also. Your staff were very supportive of a surrounding neighborhood community several months ago when they reached out, said that they wanted to host a neighborhood meeting that was urgent due to a number of violent crimes and drive-by shootings. And the museum, true to its nature, true to what it had been doing even prior to the pandemic, opened up its doors and was able to accommodate that group in a safe, socially distanced way, had the technology and everything in place to where it was really helpful. I've been hearing since then all types of residents reaching out who were so grateful for having that meeting and made them more informed, feel like it made them more able to adjust and deal with what they were dealing with and to counteract what was going on in their community. So I want to thank you for that. I also want to thank you for your leadership and coming aboard and really helping us with the co-train project with the house. While that traditionally has not fallen under the museum's purview, I think your understanding of the house's value to our community and what it can mean going forward to its historical significance and the sort of treasure that it provides as a citywide asset. I'm grateful for your participation there as well.
Thank you.
Very good. Any further comments, questions? Well, this concludes all of our regular agenda items. If there is no further comment and no objection, I will close the meeting. Mayor Lee, closed.